My girlfriend freaked out when her best friend kissed another girl at our party after swearing they were just friends. I knew Rachel was in love with Connor the moment she introduced us. The way she laughed at his stupid jokes, touched his arm every 5 seconds, and lit up whenever he texted. But she swore they were just best friends from college. "You're being paranoid," she'd say. "Connor's like a brother to me." Brothers don't make their sisters giggle like that. We'd been together 2 years. Connor had been around for all of it. Every date night became a group hang because Connor was lonely. Every vacation needed an extra room because Connor didn't want to travel alone. Every milestone in our relationship had Connor standing right there, third-wheeling like it was his job. Rachel would cancel our plans if Connor needed her. Forgot my birthday dinner because Connor had a bad day at work. Left my sister's wedding early because Connor called drunk from a bar. But whenever I brought it up, I was the jealous boyfriend who didn't understand friendship. 6 months ago, Connor started dating Stephanie. Rachel hated her immediately, said she was vapid, wrong for him, using him for money he didn't have. When they broke up last month, Rachel threw a celebration dinner. Just the 3 of us. She spent the whole night telling Connor he deserved better, that the right woman was out there waiting for him. She said this while holding my hand. The breaking point was last Thursday. I came home early from work and heard Rachel on the phone. "I can't tell him how I feel," she was saying. "It would ruin everything." I stood in the hallway listening. "But seeing you with Stephanie killed me. I wanted to scream every time she touched you." My stomach dropped. She was quiet, then laughed. "Stop it, Connor. You know I can't do that while I'm with Jason." I walked back outside, sat in my car for an hour, then came home acting normal. Rachel kissed me hello like she hadn't just admitted to emotional cheating. That's when I decided to test my theory. Friday night, I suggested we throw a party. Rachel loved parties and immediately started planning. Made sure to invite Connor first. "He needs cheering up after Stephanie," she said. I invited 40 people, including Lisa, this girl from my gym who'd been flirting with me for months. Gorgeous, confident, exactly Connor's type. When Connor arrived, already 3 beers deep, I pulled Lisa aside. "That guy Connor just became single," I said. "You should talk to him." Lisa didn't need convincing. Within an hour, she was sitting on Connor's lap, running her fingers through his hair, whispering in his ear. Connor was eating it up. Hand on her thigh, leaning into her neck, doing that laugh that made Rachel crazy. I found Rachel in the kitchen and pointed to the couch. "Look at Connor and Lisa. They're perfect together." Rachel's face changed instantly. The mask slipped. Pure rage flashed in her eyes before she caught herself. "She's not right for him," she said through gritted teeth. "Why not?" "She's beautiful, smart, clearly into him." "She's a slut," Rachel spat. "Connor deserves better." "Better like who?" I asked. "Someone who understands him?" Rachel wasn't listening. She was watching Lisa kiss Connor's neck. Her hands were shaking. Wine sloshed over her glass. Then Lisa fully kissed Connor. Full makeout, hands in hair, bodies pressed together. Rachel's glass shattered on the floor. She stormed across the room, grabbed Lisa by the hair, and yanked her off Connor. "Get off him!" she screamed. "He's not yours!" Lisa stumbled back, shocked. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "You don't deserve him." Rachel was crying now, mascara running down her face. "You don't know him like I do. You don't love him." The entire party stopped. 40 people staring at my girlfriend having a complete breakdown over her friend kissing someone else. Connor stood up, confused and drunk. "Rachel, what are you doing?" "How could you?" she screamed at him. "With her? After everything?" "Everything what?" Connor asked. "We're friends." "You have a boyfriend." "That's not, you know it's not." Rachel turned to me, finally realizing what she'd done. Her face went white. "Jason, I can explain." "Explain what?" I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "That you're in love with Connor? That you've been using me as a placeholder for 2 years? That you just assaulted a woman for kissing your friend? It's not like that." "Then what's it like? Because from where I'm standing, you just showed everyone exactly who you really are." She tried to grab my hand. "Please, let's talk privately." "No. You made this public. You've been lying to me publicly for 2 years. Everyone here knows Connor comes first. Everyone knows you ditched me for him. Everyone just watched you lose your mind because he kissed someone else." I turned to the crowd. "Party's over. Everyone out. Rachel, you too. This is my apartment too." "Not according to the lease you signed," I said. "Get out." People started filing toward the door, some grabbing coats, others just wanting to escape the mess. Connor stood frozen by the couch, looking between me and Rachel like he couldn't process what just happened. Lisa was already gone, probably halfway down the block by now. Rachel's face crumpled as the last few guests shuffled out, and the door clicked shut behind them. The silence hit like a wall. She stood there in the doorway, mascara streaked down her cheeks, hair wild from when she grabbed Lisa. Her hands were shaking. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. I bent down and started picking up pieces of broken glass from her wine glass. Red wine had splattered across the hardwood floor like blood. I grabbed paper towels from the kitchen and started wiping it up, keeping my eyes down. Rachel took a step toward me. I moved to the next spot, collecting more glass shards. She tried again to say something, her mouth forming words that wouldn't come. I just kept cleaning. Beer bottles littered every surface. Someone had spilled chips all over the coffee table. I gathered empty cups and stacked them, my movements mechanical and precise. Rachel's breathing got louder, more ragged. She was crying harder now, those ugly sobs where you can't catch your breath. I walked past her to throw away the trash, close enough that she could have reached out and touched me, but she didn't. When I came back to wipe down the table, she finally found her voice. "Jason, we need to talk." "No, we don't," I said, scrubbing at a beer ring. "I already said everything in front of 40 people. Please just listen to me for 1 second." Her voice cracked. "You already told me everything I need to know." I moved to the kitchen counter, spraying cleaner on sticky spots where drinks had been sitting. Rachel followed me, her footsteps hesitant. "It's not what you think. I can explain. You assaulted someone because she kissed your friend. What's there to explain?" I kept my voice flat and even. She reached for my arm. I stepped back before she could touch me. "Don't. Jason, please." Fresh tears rolled down her face. I don't know what came over me. I just saw them together and something snapped. Yeah, something snapped all right. Your mask. I threw the paper towel in the trash harder than necessary. 2 years, Rachel. 2 years of you telling me I was paranoid and jealous and didn't understand friendship. You don't understand. Connor and I have history. We've been through so much together. I don't care about your history. I care that you've been lying to me this entire time. I grabbed more trash off the coffee table. Rachel stood in the middle of the living room, arms wrapped around herself. I wasn't lying. I really did think we were just friends. You think friends rip other women off their friends by the hair? You think friends scream, "You don't love him," at strangers? She flinched. I know how it looked. But my feelings for Connor are complicated. It's not simple like you're making it. It's actually very simple. You're in love with him. You have been the whole time we've been together. And I've been the idiot placeholder until he figured out he wanted you too. I picked up more bottles, the glass clinking together. That's not fair. Fair? You forgot my birthday dinner because Connor had a bad day at work. You left my sister's wedding early because Connor called drunk. Every single plan we made got canceled or changed if Connor needed something. My voice stayed level, but my hands gripped the bottles tighter. You're exaggerating. Am I? Name one time in the last 6 months where you picked me over Connor. Just one. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the floor. That's what I thought. I walked to the kitchen and dumped the bottles in recycling. When I came back, Rachel was crying again, but quieter now. I do love you, she whispered. Just not enough. I grabbed the last few cups from the end table. You should sleep on the couch tonight. This is my apartment too. You can't just kick me out of our bedroom. Watch me. I headed toward the bedroom. Jason, wait. Please don't do this. We can work through this. I stopped at the bedroom door and looked back at her. She looked small and broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd been planning this party yesterday. Part of me wanted to feel bad for her. The rest of me remembered 2 years of being second choice. There's nothing to work through. You made your choice every single day for 2 years. Tonight, you just finally showed everyone the truth. I went into the bedroom and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking now. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone, scrolling to Mitchell's number. Did Lisa get home okay? I texted. The dots appeared almost right away. Yeah, she left right after with some friends. She's pretty freaked out, but okay physically. You good? Been better. Thanks for checking on her. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. The apartment was quiet now, except for the sound of Rachel crying in the living room. My phone buzzed with another text from Mitchell. That was intense, man. Never seen anything like that. You need anything? Just need to get through tonight. I lay back on the bed, still in my clothes, and closed my eyes. Sleep wasn't going to happen, but I could at least pretend. Around 2 a.m., I heard Rachel's voice through the door. She was on the phone, her tone different now, softer, pleading. I pressed my ear against the door. I'm so sorry, she was saying. I don't know what happened. I just lost it when I saw her kissing you. Silence while Connor talked. No, I know. I know I made it weird. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't stand watching her touch you like that. More silence. Please don't say that. We can still be friends. Nothing has to change. I almost laughed. Everything had already changed. Connor, please. I need you in my life. I can't lose you too. Her voice broke. I understand. I'll give you space. Just please don't hate me. She was quiet for a long time. I love you too. As a friend, I know. Okay. Good night. I heard her phone hit the couch cushion, then more crying. I went back to bed, staring at the ceiling until gray light started filtering through the blinds. When I finally emerged the next morning, Rachel was exactly where I'd left her. Sitting on the couch, surrounded by tissues, phone in her hands. She looked up when she heard the bedroom door, her eyes red and swollen. Jason, I'm so glad you're up. We need to talk about last night because I think I can explain everything if you just give me a chance. I'm going to work. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. Wait, please. My feelings for Connor, they're not what you think. It's just confused friendship. I've been thinking about it all night, and I realize now that I love you and only you, and what happened was just a moment of insanity. I opened the door. I'm going to work. Jason! I closed the door on her voice and took the stairs down to the parking garage. My car felt like the only safe space left in the world. I spent the whole drive replaying her voice on the phone with Connor. The way she laughed when he said something. How she told him she couldn't do this while she was with me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Work was a blur of emails and meetings where I nodded at the right times but absorbed nothing. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel asking when I'd be home. I ignored it. Another text came 10 minutes later saying she wanted to make things right. I turned my phone face down on my desk and tried to focus on a spreadsheet that might as well have been written in another language. When I finally pulled into our parking garage that evening, I sat in my car for 5 minutes, working up the energy to go inside. The elevator ride up felt like walking to my own funeral. I unlocked the apartment door and immediately smelled garlic and tomatoes. Rachel had cooked pasta, my favorite, and the whole place was spotless. She'd even lit candles on the dining table like this was some romantic dinner instead of the aftermath of her completely losing it in front of 40 people. She appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron, her eyes puffy and red but trying to smile. I made dinner, she said. Your favorite. I thought we could eat and talk about everything. I walked past her toward the bedroom. I already ate. Jason, please. I spent all day cooking and cleaning. Can we just sit down together? I kept walking. I'm tired. The bedroom door closed behind me and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Through the door, I could hear her crying in the kitchen. Soft at first, then harder. The kind of crying where you can't catch your breath. Part of me wanted to feel bad for her. The rest of me remembered 2 years of being second choice. I pulled out my phone and lay back, scrolling through nothing, just needing something to do with my hands. The crying continued for maybe 20 minutes before it got quiet. I heard the bathroom door close, water running, then silence again. Around 9, there was a knock on the bedroom door. Soft, hesitant. Jason, can we please talk about next steps? I stayed on the bed, eyes on the ceiling. Another knock. I know you're awake. Please, we need to figure this out. I got up and opened the door. Rachel stood there in pajamas, tissue in hand, mascara smudged under her eyes even though she'd obviously tried to wash it off. She looked smaller somehow, like the last few hours had physically shrunk her. What do you want to talk about? I asked. Next steps. What happens now? How we move forward from this. The next step is figuring out how to separate our lives since this relationship is obviously over. Her face crumpled. Don't say that. Please don't say that. What else is there to say, Rachel? You attacked someone at our party because they kissed Connor. You screamed that they didn't deserve him, in front of everyone we know. I know it was crazy. I don't know what came over me. But we can work through this. I'll cut off Connor completely. I'll go to therapy. Whatever it takes. I leaned against the doorframe. You shouldn't have to cut off your best friend unless you admit he was always more than that to you. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's not like that. Then what's it like? Because from where I'm standing, you just proved exactly what I've been saying for 2 years. I'll do anything. Please. Let's just talk about this. Come sit down. I walked past her to the living room and sat on the couch. She followed, sitting on the other end, hands twisted in her lap. The candles on the dining table had burned down to nothing. We need to go through the logistics of the apartment, I said. The lease. Furniture, bills. Can we talk about us first? About our relationship? There is no us. There's logistics. That's all that's left. She started crying again. Don't do this. We've been together 2 years. That has to mean something. It did mean something. It meant I was available and Connor wasn't. That's not fair. Fair? You forgot my birthday because Connor had a bad day at work. You left my sister's wedding early because he called drunk. Every single plan we made got canceled if Connor needed you. And I'm the one being unfair? She wiped her eyes with the tissue, already falling apart in her hands. I know I prioritized him too much. I can change that. I will change that. The lease, I said. We're both on it. It ends in 4 months. We need to figure out who moves out or if we break it early. I don't want to talk about the lease. I want to talk about saving our relationship. There's nothing to save. Let's focus on practical stuff. The couch is mine. I bought it. The TV was yours. Kitchen stuff we can split. For 2 hours, we went back and forth like this. I'd bring up something practical and she'd try to steer back to our relationship. Who paid which bills? Whether we'd tell our families together or separately. What to do about the friends we shared. She kept crying and asking if we could work through this, and I kept redirecting to logistics. My brain felt like static, just going through motions, making lists of what needed to happen. Around 11, she finally broke. I've been in love with Connor since college. The words hung in the air between us. I'd known it, obviously, but hearing her actually say it felt different. Final. I convinced myself it was just friendship, she continued. He never showed any romantic interest, so I told myself what I felt wasn't real. That it would go away if I just ignored it long enough. And me? You were wonderful. You are wonderful. You loved me and you were there and you wanted me. Connor didn't, so I chose you. I was available and he wasn't. It's not that simple. It really is. You settled for me because you couldn't have him. I was your backup plan. No, I did love you. I do love you. But I also loved him and I didn't know how to deal with that. I stood up. Your honesty is 2 years too late. I'm going to bed. You can sleep out here. She jumped up. Please let me stay. Let's keep talking. I need to explain more. I'm exhausted, Rachel. I need space to process the fact that I was literally your second choice for 2 years. You weren't. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Good night. I closed the bedroom door and locked it. Through the door, I heard her crying again, then footsteps to the bathroom, more water running. I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, my mind racing through every moment of the last 2 years, seeing them all differently now. Every time she'd lit up when Connor texted. Every canceled plan. Every time I'd felt like I was competing for her attention. I hadn't been paranoid. I'd been right the whole time. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Light filtered through the blinds and I checked my phone. Almost 9. Rachel usually left for work at 8. I got up and opened the bedroom door. The apartment was empty. Her work bag was gone from the hook by the door. The couch still had a blanket and pillow on it where she'd slept. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of papers covered in Rachel's handwriting. 6 pages, front and back. I made coffee and sat down at the table, the letter in front of me. My hand shook slightly as I picked up the first page. The letter started with an apology for the party, for attacking Lisa, for everything. Then it dove into her feelings for Connor. She'd been journaling about it for years, apparently. Pages and pages of trying to convince herself she'd get over it. She wrote about the first time she realized she loved him, sophomore year of college when he stayed up all night helping her study for a chemistry exam. How she'd almost told him then, but chickened out. How she'd dated other guys trying to make the feelings go away. How when she met me after graduation, she thought she'd finally moved on because I made her happy, and Connor seemed like ancient history. But then Connor moved to the same city, started hanging around more, and all those feelings came rushing back. She wrote about the guilt she felt every time she prioritized him over me. How she knew it was wrong but couldn't help herself. Being near him felt necessary, like breathing. She wrote about seeing him with Stephanie and wanting to scream. About the celebration dinner when they broke up, and how she'd held my hand while thinking about Connor. About the phone call I'd overheard, and how relieved she was that I hadn't seemed to notice. The last 2 pages were her begging for another chance. Saying she understood if I couldn't forgive her but asking me to at least consider it. That she'd go to therapy, cut off Connor completely, do whatever it took. That she loved me and didn't want to lose me. That she was sorry for wasting 2 years of my life. But those years had meant something to her even if they were complicated. I set the letter down and finished my coffee. My phone buzzed, Mitchell asking if I wanted to grab lunch. I stared at my phone, then at the letter, then around the apartment that suddenly felt suffocating. I couldn't be here anymore. Not with Rachel's stuff everywhere, not with the memory of her breakdown, not with 6 pages of her explaining how I was never really her first choice. I texted Mitchell back asking if I could crash at his place for a few days. The response came back almost instantly saying yes, come over whenever. His couch was mine for as long as I needed it. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Toothbrush, phone charger, work clothes for the next few days. My hands moved on autopilot while my brain stayed numb. Before I left, I pulled out my phone and texted Rachel that I was staying with a friend, and we'd talk about the apartment later. I didn't wait for a response. Just grabbed my bag, locked the door behind me, and headed down to my car. Mitchell's apartment smelled like old pizza and laundry detergent. I dropped my bag by the couch and collapsed onto it, feeling the exhaustion hit me all at once. Mitchell grabbed 2 beers from his fridge and handed me one without asking if I wanted it. We sat in silence for a minute before he finally spoke up and asked if I felt bad about the whole Lisa setup. I took a long drink before answering. Part of me did feel guilty about using her like that, about turning the party into some kind of trap. But another part of me felt relieved that I finally had proof I wasn't losing my mind. Rachel's reaction showed everyone exactly what I'd been dealing with for 2 years. Mitchell nodded slowly and said he got it, but he also pointed out that what I did was pretty calculated. He said after 2 years of being gaslit, I probably felt like I had no other choice, but it was still something. The way I handled relationships, the way I tested people instead of just having honest conversations, I didn't have a good response to that because he was right. My phone started buzzing on the coffee table, text after text lighting up the screen. Rachel asking where I was, if I was safe, saying she was sorry over and over. Mixed in were messages begging me to come home so we could talk. I picked up the phone and typed out one message saying I was fine and staying with a friend. Then I muted the conversation because I couldn't deal with her trying to manipulate me into feeling bad for leaving. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Lisa. She was checking if I was okay and apologizing for her part in what happened at the party. I felt terrible reading it because she had nothing to apologize for. I texted back right away saying she didn't know what she was walking into, and I was the one who owed her an apology for using her as a pawn. She responded almost immediately saying she appreciated that, and had kind of figured something weird was going on based on Rachel's reaction. Then she mentioned that Rachel grabbed her hair hard enough to actually pull some out, and she wanted to know if I thought Rachel might try to contact her or cause more problems. I assured her that Rachel's anger was about Connor, not about her personally. But I gave her Connor's number anyway just in case she needed to coordinate anything or felt unsafe. Lisa thanked me and said she hoped I'd find someone who actually put me first next time. That message hit harder than I expected. 3 days passed before I heard from Connor. He texted saying Rachel had shown up at his apartment the night before, crying and begging to talk. He let her in to avoid making a scene in the hallway with his neighbors watching. She spent an hour confessing her feelings and asking if he could ever see her romantically. Connor said he was honest with her that he'd never had those kinds of feelings and couldn't imagine developing them now after everything that happened. Rachel didn't take it well according to him. She accused him of leading her on for years by being so close and relying on her emotionally. I read the message twice before responding. I told Connor I felt bad he had to deal with her breakdown, but I also pointed out that he did rely on her pretty heavily. He always knew she'd drop everything for him, cancel plans with me, show up whenever he called. Connor went quiet for a while before texting back that he probably took advantage of her availability, without thinking about why she was always so eager to help. At least he could admit it now. My phone rang from an unknown number that afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Rachel's sister, Amy. She said Rachel asked her to reach out because I wasn't responding to messages anymore. Amy launched into this whole speech about how Rachel made a mistake but really loved me, and couldn't I at least try to work things out? I had to stop her and explain that being someone's backup plan isn't love. Amy tried to argue, but I cut her off and told her about the 2 years of canceled plans, forgotten birthdays, leaving my sister's wedding early, all of it. The line went quiet for a long time before Amy admitted she didn't know it was that bad. She said Rachel always talked about me like everything was fine, like we were happy. I told her we weren't happy. I was just too stupid to see what was right in front of me. Amy's voice got softer and she said she understood my perspective now. She hoped I'd at least consider talking to Rachel eventually, but she'd tell her sister to give me space. I thanked her and hung up, then turned my phone completely off because I needed a break from all of it. A week passed before I met with the landlord at his office downtown. He was this older guy named Frank who always wore Hawaiian shirts and seemed way too relaxed for someone who dealt with tenant drama all day. I explained the situation without getting into all the messy details, just said my girlfriend and I were splitting up and needed to figure out the lease. Frank nodded and pulled up our contract on his computer. He explained we were both on the lease until it ended in 4 months, and breaking it early would cost 2 months' rent as a penalty. I felt my stomach drop when he said the number out loud. That was basically my entire emergency fund wiped out in one shot. Frank must have seen my face change because he suggested one of us could move out while still paying half the rent until the lease ended. That way we wouldn't have to pay the penalty, but also wouldn't have to live together. I thanked him and left his office feeling trapped. I sat in my car doing the math on my phone for 20 minutes. Even if I moved out and kept paying half the rent, I'd need to find a new place and pay first month, last month, and security deposit. That was still more money than I had saved up. Rachel was in the same boat financially, probably worse since she made less than me. We were stuck in this awful situation where neither of us could afford to leave without going broke. I called Rachel that afternoon from my car outside Mitchell's apartment. It was the first time we'd actually talked since I left a week ago. She answered on the second ring, and her voice sounded hollow and tired, nothing like the confident tone she usually had. She started apologizing immediately, saying she knew I didn't want to hear it, but she needed me to know how sorry she was. I cut her off and told her we needed to focus on the lease situation. Rachel went quiet for a second, then asked what the landlord said. I explained the whole thing about the 4 months left and the penalty for breaking early. She made this small defeated sound and said she couldn't afford to pay half the rent if she moved out because she'd need money for a new place too. I told her I was in the same situation. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us probably doing the same depressing math in our heads. Rachel finally suggested maybe we could just tough it out for 4 months, stay out of each other's way until the lease ended. I could hear her voice crack when she said it, like the idea of living together as strangers was breaking her heart all over again. I told her it was probably our only option unless one of us wanted to go into serious debt. She agreed quietly and asked when I wanted to move my stuff back in. I said I'd come by that weekend when she was at work, so we wouldn't have to see each other during the actual move. Rachel started to protest, but then just said okay, and hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I'd just agreed to 4 months of torture. Moving back into the apartment that Saturday was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. Rachel had clearly been crying constantly based on the tissues everywhere and her puffy red eyes when she opened the door. She'd promised to be gone, but I guess she wanted to see me or thought we'd talk. I walked past her without saying anything and started carrying my boxes to the bedroom. Rachel followed me around, trying to make small talk about the weather and asking if I needed help. I finally stopped and told her we were roommates now, nothing more. I said we'd split the bills, stay out of each other's way, and get through the next 4 months without drama. She looked like I'd slapped her but nodded and went to her bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. I spent the rest of the day unpacking and trying not to think about how this used to be our home, and now it was just a place we both happened to sleep. The first week back was incredibly tense. Both of us were trying to avoid being home at the same time, which meant a lot of careful planning. I started going to the gym every evening right after work and staying there for 2 hours. Then I'd grab dinner somewhere and kill more time at a coffee shop before heading home around 9. Rachel seemed to have her own avoidance schedule because I'd hear her leave early in the morning before I woke up and come back late. We'd leave notes about bills and chores on the kitchen counter instead of talking. The apartment felt like a museum of our relationship, full of photos and shared things that neither of us had the energy to deal with yet. I'd catch myself looking at a picture of us from last year's vacation and have to walk away before I got angry all over again. Connor texted me Thursday night while I was at the gym. He said Rachel had been texting him constantly, sometimes 50 messages a day. He sent me screenshots and it was painful to read. Rachel alternated between long apologies about the party and casual messages asking if they could still be friends like nothing had happened. Some of the messages were sent at 3 in the morning, just random thoughts about their college days or inside jokes. Connor said he didn't know what to do. He felt bad for her, but also felt like she wasn't respecting his need for space. He asked if I thought he should block her, or try to maintain some kind of friendship with serious boundaries. I stared at the messages for a while before responding. Part of me wanted to tell him to block her and be done with it, but another part of me remembered that they had been genuine friends for years before all this happened, even if Rachel's feelings complicated everything. I texted Connor back saying he needed to do whatever felt right for him, but from my experience, Rachel didn't respect boundaries when it came to him. I told him about the 2 years of her always putting him first, canceling our plans, forgetting important things because Connor needed her. I said she'd built her whole life around being available to him. Pattern wouldn't change overnight just because everything blew up. Connor responded saying he was leaning toward blocking her because the constant contact was affecting his mental health. He said he couldn't move on or process what happened when his phone buzzed every hour with another message from her. I told him I understood, and that he shouldn't feel guilty for protecting himself. He thanked me and said he'd probably block her number that weekend. I put my phone away and went back to lifting weights, trying to burn off the frustration of knowing Rachel was probably destroying her friendship with Connor, the same way she destroyed our relationship. When I got home that night around 10, the apartment was dark except for the light under Rachel's bedroom door. I could hear her crying softly, probably on the phone with someone. I stood in the hallway for a second listening, then went to my room and closed the door. Whatever she was going through wasn't my problem anymore. I'd spent 2 years trying to fix her moods and make her happy while she pined for someone else. Now she could deal with the consequences of her choices without me there to cushion the fall. I got ready for bed and tried to ignore the muffled sounds of her crying through the wall. This was going to be a long 4 months. 2 weeks dragged by in that apartment. Each day the same pattern of avoidance and silence. I'd come home from work, check if Rachel's door was closed, then retreat to my room or head back out to the gym. The kitchen calendar filled up with her therapy appointments, little reminders that she was supposedly working on herself. I tried not to look at them, but they were right there every time I made coffee. Connor texted me on a Tuesday evening while I was meal prepping for the week. He said he'd been thinking about our last conversation and decided to block Rachel's number that morning. Said he felt guilty about it, but couldn't keep getting bombarded with messages when he was trying to move forward with his life. I told him I understood, and that he shouldn't feel bad for protecting his mental health. He thanked me and said maybe we could grab lunch sometime soon, Just the two of us without all the drama hanging over everything. I agreed, and we left it at that. The apartment felt different after that. Knowing Rachel had lost her direct line to Connor, I wondered if she'd noticed yet, or if she was still sending messages into the void. Thursday evening, I got home around 7 after staying late to finish a project. I walked through the door and froze. Rachel was sitting on the couch in the living room. Connor was sitting in the armchair across from her. They both turned to look at me, and the expression on Connor's face made my stomach drop. Rachel stood up immediately and started talking fast. She said she'd asked Connor to come over, so we could all talk together, that she thought it would be good for everyone to clear the air. My hands tightened around my work bag. Connor shot me this apologetic look and said Rachel had told him I agreed to this conversation. The lie hit me like a slap. I looked at Rachel and saw her face go red, caught in the manipulation. She'd tricked both of us into being here. I told Connor he should leave because I wasn't doing this ambush therapy session she'd set up without asking me. Connor started to stand, but Rachel's voice cracked. She begged us both to stay, tears already streaming down her face. Said she needed closure and to apologize properly to both of us at the same time. Connor looked torn, glancing between me and Rachel like he was trying to figure out the right move. He sat back down slowly and said he'd stay for a few minutes. I stayed standing near the door, arms crossed, furious but also curious what Rachel thought closure actually looked like. Rachel wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. Then she launched into this whole prepared speech about therapy and self-awareness. Said her therapist helped her realize she'd been using me as a security blanket while pining for Connor the whole time. She apologized for wasting my time and putting Connor in an impossible position where he had to navigate her feelings without knowing they existed. Said she understood if neither of us could forgive her, and that she wasn't asking for forgiveness, just wanted us to know she was taking responsibility. Her voice kept breaking and she twisted her hands together the whole time. I stayed quiet, watching her performance. Connor shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the attention and emotion. When Rachel finished, Connor cleared his throat. He said he appreciated the apology but needed significant space from her, possibly forever. His voice was steady but firm. He told her their friendship had been built on an unbalanced dynamic where she was always chasing him emotionally, always available whenever he needed something. Said he couldn't be responsible for her feelings anymore, and that continuing any kind of friendship would just enable the same unhealthy patterns. Rachel's face crumpled, but she nodded, accepting it even though it clearly destroyed her to hear. I felt bad for her in that moment, watching her lose both of us at once, but then I remembered the 2 years of lies, and the feeling passed. I added that her apology didn't change anything about the 2 years she lied to me and herself. Told her therapy was good and I was glad she was going, but it didn't erase the damage she'd done. All the canceled plans, forgotten birthdays, times she chose Connor over me without hesitation. Said those things happened and I lived through them, and an apology couldn't undo that pain. Rachel nodded again, tears dripping off her chin onto her shirt. She said she knew she couldn't fix this, that the damage was permanent, but she needed us to know she was taking responsibility for her actions. Needed to say it out loud to our faces instead of hiding behind text messages. Connor stood up then and said he was going to head out. Rachel didn't try to stop him this time. After Connor left, the apartment felt even quieter than usual. Rachel stayed on the couch, staring at her hands. She asked in this small voice if there was any chance we could eventually be friends once enough time passed. Like years from now when everything didn't hurt so much. I thought about lying to make her feel better, but decided she'd had enough lies. Told her honestly I didn't know. That right now I was still hurt and angry, and friendship felt impossible to imagine. Maybe someday far in the future, but I couldn't promise anything. She accepted that answer and went to her room without saying anything else. I heard her crying through the wall later, but I put in headphones and tried to ignore it. The next few weeks settled into this cold routine where Rachel and I existed in the same space but barely interacted. We'd pass each other in the kitchen and exchange basic roommate communication about bills or whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. She seemed to be respecting my boundaries for the first time in our entire relationship. I noticed she was actually going to therapy twice a week based on the appointments written on the kitchen calendar in her neat handwriting. Tuesday and Friday evenings, blocked out in blue pen. Sometimes she'd come home from sessions with red eyes, but she never tried to talk to me about it. I appreciated that she was finally giving me the space I'd been asking for, even if it took everything falling apart for her to do it. Work became my refuge from the apartment tension. I stayed late most nights, volunteering for extra projects just to have a reason not to go home. Heather from accounting started stopping by my desk more often, asking how I was doing and if I wanted to grab coffee. I'd always known she was friendly, but hadn't really noticed her paying special attention until now. One afternoon, she asked if I wanted to get drinks after work on Friday. The way she asked made it clear this wasn't just coworker friendliness. I realized she'd been interested in me for a while, probably waiting for me to be single. I wasn't ready to date anyone yet, still processing everything with Rachel, but I appreciated the reminder that there were people out there who might actually put me first in a relationship. People who wouldn't cancel plans or forget important things because someone else needed them more. I told Heather I wasn't ready to date anyone yet, but suggested we could grab lunch as friends sometime. She smiled and said she figured I wasn't in that headspace, but wanted to put it out there anyway. I appreciated her being so direct about what she wanted instead of playing games or pretending things were different from they were. After 2 years of Rachel's dishonesty, someone saying exactly what they meant felt almost strange. Heather and I made plans for lunch the following week, and I left work feeling lighter than I had in months. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor saying he'd blocked Rachel's number. He explained that after a week of silence, she'd started sending him long emotional messages again, sometimes 20 or 30 in a single day. The messages alternated between apologies and desperate attempts to convince him they could still be friends if he just gave her another chance. Connor said he felt guilty about blocking her after so many years of friendship, but he knew it was the right call for his own mental health. He asked how I was doing with everything and said he hoped I wasn't struggling too much. I texted back that I was managing better than expected, and that blocking Rachel was probably necessary given her pattern of not respecting boundaries when it came to him. We made plans to grab lunch the next week, and I felt relieved that my friendship with Connor might actually survive this mess, even if it looked different now. He'd been caught in the middle of something that wasn't his fault, and I didn't want to lose him over Rachel's inability to deal with her feelings like an adult. A few days later, Rachel commented one morning that she was glad I seemed to be going out more and doing better. It was the first normalish conversation we'd had in weeks that wasn't about bills or whose turn it was to buy groceries. She was making coffee in the kitchen when I came out to leave for work, and she looked up with this careful expression like she was testing whether I'd actually talk to her. I told her cautiously that I was working on moving forward and trying to rebuild my life outside of what we'd had. She nodded and said she was happy for me, and I could tell she meant it, even though saying it probably hurt. We stood there in awkward silence for a minute before I grabbed my keys and headed out. 3 months crawled by in that strange roommate limbo where we existed in the same space but lived completely separate lives. Then one Saturday morning, Rachel mentioned she'd been looking at apartments for when our lease ended in a month. She showed me a few options on her laptop, one-bedroom places across town that she could afford on her own. She asked if I had preferences about who kept which furniture, and I was surprised by how civil and practical the conversation felt. We sat at the kitchen table with a list of everything we owned together and started dividing it up. The couch she'd picked out could go with her. The coffee table I'd bought from a thrift store before we even met would stay with me. Kitchen stuff got split down the middle. We spent that evening going through our shared belongings, and it was sad but also relieving to untangle our lives piece by piece. Rachel got emotional a few times, her eyes filling up when we decided who kept the throw blanket we'd bought on our first vacation together. But she mostly kept it together, and I appreciated that she was trying to make this process as painless as possible, instead of fighting over every little thing. A week later, Mitchell threw a small party at his place and invited me. I realized while getting ready that this was the first social event I'd been to since the disaster party 3 months ago. Walking into Mitchell's apartment filled with people laughing and drinking felt surreal, like stepping back into a life I'd forgotten existed. It felt good to be around friends who weren't connected to Rachel, people who didn't look at me with pity or awkwardness. I started feeling like myself again for the first time in months, joking around with Mitchell and his girlfriend and actually enjoying being social. That's when I met Elena, a friend of Mitchell's girlfriend who was funny and easy to talk to. She had this way of making observations about people at the party that were sharp but not mean, and I found myself laughing more than I had in forever. We ended up talking in the corner for over an hour about everything from bad movies to our terrible bosses. When the party wound down, we exchanged numbers, but I was clear that I wasn't looking for anything serious right now. Elena said she was in the same place after her own recent breakup, and we agreed to just be friends who could text and hang out without any pressure. Over the next few weeks, Elena and I started texting regularly and grabbed coffee a few times. It was nice having someone to talk to who didn't have any history with the Rachel situation and wouldn't judge me for how I'd handled things. She was a good listener and shared her own messy breakup story about an ex who cheated on her with a coworker. We bonded over learning to trust people again and not letting one bad relationship destroy our ability to connect with others. Elena made me feel like maybe I could eventually have a healthy relationship where I wasn't competing for attention or wondering if I was someone's second choice. Finally, the lease ended and moving day arrived. Rachel's friends showed up with a truck to help her load furniture and boxes. We were polite during the whole process, passing each other in the hallway with our arms full, careful not to brush against each other or make unnecessary eye contact. When everything was loaded and Rachel was about to leave, she thanked me for handling everything as maturely as possible given the circumstances. I told her I hoped therapy was helping, and that she'd figure out what she actually wanted instead of just reacting to whoever was in front of her. She nodded and said she was working on it, then climbed into the truck and drove away to her new apartment across town. I spent the first night in my new place sitting on the floor eating pizza straight from the box because I hadn't unpacked plates yet. The apartment was smaller than what Rachel and I had shared, just a one-bedroom in a building that needed some work. But walking through the empty rooms felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. No Connor's stuff in the corner, no photos of Rachel and Connor from college trips, no reminders of being someone's backup plan. I texted Mitchell and Elena to come over the next evening to help me celebrate having my own space again. Mitchell showed up with beer, and Elena brought a housewarming plant she insisted would survive even my complete lack of gardening skills. We sat on my secondhand couch eating cheap pizza and laughing about Mitchell's terrible apartment hunting stories, and I realized this was the first time in months I'd felt completely relaxed around people. Elena made jokes about my empty walls and lack of furniture, but it felt good instead of mean, like she was teasing a friend instead of judging me. Mitchell asked if I'd heard from Rachel since the move, and I said no, that we'd kept things clean during the separation, and I wanted to keep it that way. Elena shared her own story about running into her ex at a grocery store and how awkward it was, and we all agreed that post-breakup encounters were the worst. The evening felt easy and comfortable, like maybe I was building something healthier this time around. Connor texted me a few days later asking if I wanted to grab lunch, and I agreed to meet him at this sandwich place halfway between our apartments. He looked tired when he walked in, like he'd been doing a lot of thinking, and we both ordered before sitting down in a corner booth away from other people. Connor started by saying he'd been in therapy trying to work through his role in everything that happened, and I appreciated that he didn't immediately try to defend himself. He admitted that looking back, he probably did take advantage of Rachel's feelings on some level, even if he didn't consciously realize what he was doing at the time. Connor said his therapist helped him see that he'd gotten comfortable having someone always available to support him emotionally, and he never questioned why Rachel was so willing to drop everything for him. I told him I appreciated the honesty, and admitted that my party setup was manipulative even if it did reveal the truth about Rachel's feelings. We both sat there for a minute just eating our sandwiches and processing, and then Connor said he thought we both had things to work on when it came to how we handle relationships and communicate with people. I agreed and said I'd been thinking about that a lot, about how I let things build up for 2 years instead of addressing problems directly. Connor asked if we could stay friends after everything, and I said I thought we could, but it would take time to rebuild trust. We finished lunch talking about lighter stuff like work and his new apartment, and when we left, I felt like maybe we'd both grown up a little bit from the whole mess. Elena and I kept hanging out over the next few months, grabbing coffee and going to movies and texting about random stuff throughout the day. She made me laugh with her observations about people and called me out when I was guarded or closed off about my feelings. One night after we'd seen a movie together, she asked if I'd ever consider actually dating her instead of just being friends, and I realized I'd been thinking about the same thing, but was scared to mess up a good friendship. We decided to try dating for real, but agreed to take things slow and be honest about our baggage from previous relationships. Elena said she wanted someone who would actually prioritize her and not make her compete for attention, and I told her that's exactly what I wanted too. Our first official date was at this Italian place near her apartment, and it felt completely different from dating Rachel, because Elena was fully present and engaged instead of checking her phone every 5 minutes or seeming distracted. She asked me real questions about my life and actually listened to the answers, and when I told stories, she remembered details from previous conversations. Elena made me feel like I was interesting and worth paying attention to, not like I was someone's consolation prize. We kissed goodnight outside her building, and I drove home feeling genuinely excited about where things might go. 6 months after the party, I stopped at a coffee shop near my office and saw Rachel sitting at a corner table working on her laptop. My stomach dropped for a second, but then I realized I didn't feel angry or hurt anymore, just sort of neutral about seeing her. She looked up and saw me, and her face went through several emotions before settling on something like cautious hope. I walked over and asked how she was doing, and we ended up talking for about 10 minutes about surface-level stuff. Rachel told me she was still going to therapy twice a week and had started dating someone new, a guy from her office who seemed really into her. She looked healthier than the last time I'd seen her, less stressed and more comfortable in her own skin. Rachel asked about me, and I told her about Elena and my new apartment, and she seemed genuinely happy for me instead of jealous or bitter. She apologized again for everything that happened and said therapy was helping her understand why she'd handled things so badly with Connor and me. I told her I was glad she was working on herself and that I hoped things worked out with her new relationship. We said goodbye, and I left feeling grateful that we'd both survived the mess and come out better for it, even if getting there had been painful. Walking back to my car, I thought about how much had changed in 6 months, how I'd gone from being someone's second choice to building something real with Elena, and I felt genuinely hopeful about the future for the first time in years.